I'll be honest, guys, I have some regrets. There's some things about my TCG business journey that if I could go back, I probably would not do them again. So I'm going to talk about a couple of those things in this video. First thing that comes to mind is waiting too long, hesitating. And I have hesitated in several different ways. First of all, back in like 2020, 2019, 2020, I was sitting on a massive collection of Magic the Gathering cards, and I knew I was never going to play again. And I knew that some of them were probably valuable. And I knew that some people made money by selling them. And it would just, every time that I would like move apartments or, clean up my closet or anything like that, I would move those cards around and I'd be like, I should do something with these. But back then, I was, I didn't have my priorities straight. I spent a lot of my free time partying, playing video games, watching TV, trying to get laid. Young male energy. And I did not get started on the journey of entrepreneurship as early as I should have, especially when I was sitting on an asset like that it wasn't a lot of cards, it wasn't like a lot of money, but when I finally did get started, which was in 2021, it unlocked just entrepreneurship in general for me. I learned the fundamentals of e-commerce and I carried those skills into other e-commerce ventures. And then I carried the skills that I gained in those to become a marketing specialist. Then I took those skills, used them to build the blue-collar business that I currently own and operate as my day job right now. And then now I've come back to doing TCG stuff with just a totally different mindset and ideas. And, I regret waiting so long. I regret waiting so long to get started in the first place. And I regret stopping the times that I have stopped in the past because my mindset was just so small. I thought so small about the potential. I wasn't thinking long term. If I had committed back then, if I had, and I didn't know what I know now, so I can't beat myself up too much. But again, I'm just talking, if I could go back and change some things, I would have started building a TCG business earlier, back in 2019, 2020. And after I did launch mine in 2021, I would have kept at it. And instead of being afraid of the obstacles that I was facing, like how do I get more supply? How do I ship large orders? Like instead of being afraid of those problems, I would have embraced those problems, looked at them as opportunities, and then leaned into them and leveled up as an entrepreneur, and then leveled up the business, and perhaps have been able to build a cash flowing asset that would have allowed me to bypass a lot of the hardships that I have had the last half decade while I tried to figure out other paths when I had something that was actually kind of working. But I was intimidated by different obstacles and different problems, and so I would stop, I would hesitate instead of just figuring it out, leaning in and figuring it out and being bold. So that's regret number one, is waiting and hesitation and fear. Fear is part of regret number two. I'll say regret number two, actually I'll circle back around to that. Regret number two is probably looking for shortcuts and trying to find the easy route. So the second time that I really tried to do a TCG business, I was like, oh, you know what? I can probably buy sealed product, open it for YouTube, monetize the channel, and make money that way. And then I could maybe even do that full time. And this was like recently that I was thinking about this. This was like last year or like 2 years ago that I really started thinking about it. And so I started buying stuff and started practicing opening, and it was good. I broke the ice on YouTube, which was an important thing for me to do. But you know, the more I learned, and after I got into it and started really learning how YouTube works, I realized that is not a viable business model for, at least not for me. I am not cool. I'm not funny. I'm not particularly likable. I'm not charming or charismatic. I'm no Pokey Rev. I'm no Ando. And so ripping sealed product in exchange for YouTube monetization and sponsorships, probably not going to work for me. I'm not going to become a viral sensation. I'm not Pat Flynn. So now that I understand that YouTube is an asset and it's a skill set, but I am the type of person that I need a monetization engine that is different from the content. Content is great as a marketing tool for me, for my disposition. I'm friends with like full-time YouTubers and stuff like that. They are different. I'm not like that. I run a blue-collar business that I use content to grow, and I use paid ads and stuff like that. So I can do that, but none of my stuff goes viral. I'm not a great content creator by any means. So what I realized is that, I just need to have a monetization engine attached. So that's where I finally figured out, okay, I can use YouTube and I can use organic and paid content to drive traffic to an e-commerce operation. So I started to fuse everything together. So that's where, regret number 2 was thinking that I could take the easy route and just like start a YouTube channel and have like easy attendees. And so instead of leaning into the real opportunity, which was combining several difficult things, I just chased the easy thing. And then when it didn't work out, I ended up making mistake number 1, which was waiting and hesitating and quitting. So that's number 1, it was waiting. Number 2 is looking for an easy answer, or looking for an easy path. Regret number 3, I would say, is FOMO and having a scarcity mindset. So this has affected me in a number of ways. When I was trying to do the YouTube thing first time, I had a lot of FOMO about missing out on the latest sealed product, and I thought that the way that I was going to be successful is that I had to go out, I had to get the latest sets, even if I had to pay above market for them, and I had to be the first one to open. And sure, that might be a viable strategy for people who already have a platform. It's not really a way that someone like me can build a YouTube business. So having that FOMO, overspending, wasting time, chasing sealed product, trying to keep up with the latest trends, all that FOMO and scarcity mindset there. It was a big waste of time, big waste of energy, a lot of unnecessary anxiety, and it kind of threw me off my real course last year. Last year I should have been focusing a little bit more on my main business, the blue collar business, and I had reached a point where I was like getting really stressed, really overwhelmed with it, and I had thought that the other way was going to be the easy route, and then the FOMO got mixed up in there, and so I wasted time and money chasing sealed product, trying to do a YouTube thing, and then also even now the scarcity mindset still hits me less. I've become a lot more chill about it, but like chasing deals on like Facebook Marketplace, or like seeing stuff at a good price that I'm like, oh, that's a great opportunity, I need to take advantage of it right now. There's something to be said for like first mover advantage, or like not hesitating when you see a good opportunity. However, you don't want to live with like under FOMO all the time. You don't want to live with a scarcity mindset. What I have learned is that there's going to be another opportunity tomorrow. There's going to be another opportunity next week. It won't be the same one. The window any particular window of opportunity is only going to be open for a limited amount of time, but a different window will open if you are observant, if you are bold, if you are educated, if you are knowledgeable. And so as you grow as an entrepreneur, and especially as you grow in a particular industry, you start to recognize that there are opportunities everywhere. So like in my case, like I'll see that cards are underpriced with low stock, and I'll be like, if I can acquire some of those cards, I know I'm going to be able to sell them at a higher price. I've done this several times. It works for me. And so when I first started noticing this, what I would do is I would overspend, and it's speculating on cards is really what it is. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And I would FOMO into things that were higher risk, and I would spend more money than I could really justify. And then the price would shift, or something would happen, or more supply would come to the market, and I wouldn't end up making as much money as I wanted. I haven't had a big loss from anything like this, but what I've learned is to go back to something that Felix wrote in the book How to Get Rich, which is a great book that you really should read. And he says, think big and act small. And so what I have started to learn is that instead of like seeing that there's a really good opportunity that, there's only a couple copies left of a certain card, and I can maybe buy them out, or I can, buy somewhere else, or I can but I got to spend $100 or $200 or $300 right now. And like, that's all of the capital that I have, and I'm going all in on just one single play. What I've learned is that that's not really a great idea for me. It usually, sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. I find it's much better to place a wider variety of smaller bets with greater upside and lower downside on a more frequent basis, sort of like dollar cost averaging. Instead of trying to get the maximum possible return on stuff, I want to lock in guaranteed smaller returns, and I want to largely avoid losing money. And inflation and just life is going to eat my money every day. So I want to invest in opportunities, but I don't want to over-invest in poor opportunities, or maximize my risk in narrow ways. So that FOMO and scarcity mindset is probably my third biggest regret, because there are opportunities to buy collections between 70 and 75% almost every day on Facebook Marketplace. There are opportunities to buy low stock cards and then resell them when the price goes up almost every day. Sets come out, and then the prices of other sealed products go down, and then eventually those sealed products rise. Like, in my opinion, any ETB under $80 I think is probably a good buy, because it's probably going to be worth more than $80 in the long run. And it's like, oh, but what about fees? What about blah, 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 blah. I know most ETBs, if I buy an ETB at $70, $80, and I sit on it for a while, it doesn't even have to be a long time. I know I can probably sell it on Facebook Marketplace locally without a bunch of fees for $100 to $120 if I'm just patient. So that takes a lot of that anxiety out as well. And so, instead of listening to the internet and like, oh, I need to buy this, I don't want to buy that, like, I've learned just ignore it altogether. There's opportunity everywhere. Even like video ideas, getting anxious and like staying up all night, jotting down video idea and like letting my mind spiral when I'm like, oh, I got to make this, I got to do that, I got to do that. Like, ideas will come and go, and the best ideas are probably going to stick. So that's my 3 biggest regrets that I have about how I built my TCG business. I think I'm going to say number 4 is sort of an extension of all of those. it's kind of like hesitating, kind of like FOMO, like scarcity mindset, and that's not investing in myself and in the business. And so I like to talk pretty frequently about the concept of buying back your time, buying back your energy. A lot of people talk about it. Probably my favorite example of it is Dan Martell's book, Buy Back Your Time. It's a good book. You should read it. In that book, he talks about how when you make investments in tools, in software, in systems, in employees, you're not just buying back your time, because the idea that my time was valuable was something that I just never really bought into, and I still don't necessarily buy into it, because like it really depends on what time of day and what I might otherwise be doing with my time. The idea that like, oh, my time is worth $100 an hour. Like, I'm not making $100 an hour when I'm sleeping. I'm not making $100 an hour when I'm in the shower, so it never really clicked for me. But when Dan framed it as buying back your energy, that made sense for me. I've talked about it in other videos. The most valuable thing that I can do for my businesses is to solve problems and create opportunities. And I can only do that when I am rested and resting. So like when I am at rest and I have energy and I can literally just sit around and think about stuff, that is the most valuable thing that I can ever do for my businesses. And the only way that I can free up time for that is to invest in tools and software and systems and sometimes people to take more mundane work and less valuable work off my plate. And it's not that work doesn't have value and people's labor doesn't have value, but it's that it's the return on the action, on the activity. The return that I get on thinking about the problems that my business has is far more valuable in the fact that it ends up producing more revenue or saving more money than simply fulfilling another order, or than saving money on supplies because I'm like pinching pennies and being really frugal and spending a lot more time on stuff instead of just buying a more convenient solution that costs a little bit more. So I think that's the fourth thing, is being wasteful with my time because I'm afraid to lose money. So that's like an extension of like the scarcity mindset and the fear and all that and hesitation. So those are the four things that I would say are my biggest regrets when it comes to how I built this TCG business. There are things that, I'm still going to be dealing with here and there as I continue to grow. But what I know for a fact is that when I grow, the business grows. And if I commit to my growth and to getting out of my own way, then in the long run, this business will become a cash flowing asset that I can own possibly for the rest of my life. So if you like trading cards and you want to buy some from me, go to www.getdkc.com. See you later.